There's a difference between self-identification or self-ID and self-disclosure, and it's really important to know the difference between the two. Self-identification is the act of checking the box on the voluntary self-ID form that employers typically send out to their current employees or include in their online job application. Self-disclosure, on the other hand, is very informal. That can occur at any time to anyone, whether that's a coworker and you're in a comfortable environment or setting and want to share that information about yourself with that person, or you're sharing it with your manager or HR representative because you need to request an accommodation, but you are not actually checking the box in that case. You are just sharing that information personally about yourself. So there are a number of reasons why job seekers and employees do not self-identify or self-disclose their disability to their employer. There are 4 that I can think of off the bat and something that I want to share with you all. The first being that job seekers and employees don't always know what the definition of a disability is. They don't realize that they have something that they could identify with and actually disclose to the employer. The second being, they don't need an accommodation. So in terms of disclosing disabilities, it most often occurs when a job seeker or employee needs to request an accommodation in order to perform their job. If they don't need an accommodation and don't need to make that request, then the question is really, why should I disclose my disability? What's in it for you and what's in it for me in sharing that information? And that often isn't made clear by the employer in terms of why they're interested in that information. The third reason is that the self-identification form and process is not always clear and not clearly communicated that that information is going to be kept confidential and is not going to be shared publicly with the rest of the company, the rest of the team, or externally. Especially for companies that are federal contractors, they're required by Section 503 to have at least 7% of their workforce made of individuals with disabilities, which is why they're interested in that information. It's strictly for data purposes in order to pulse the current workforce in the workplace to see what the representation is of people with disabilities. And the fourth reason is honestly discrimination. Job seekers and individuals with disabilities have a fear of being viewed differently once they disclose or identify as having a disability. They don't want their disability to come before them and be viewed for their disability instead of as a person. If they're a job seeker, they don't want that to impact their chance of receiving the job offer. And if they're a current employee, they don't want to impact their chance of receiving a promotion or future job opportunity in the workplace. That's probably the number one question that we do receive from employers is how do I increase self-disclosure rates, not only from job seekers, but current employees within my organization and the workplace. There are a lot of different answers that I could give, but the number one that it boils down to for me is marketing, branding, communication. What is your employer brand? What messages is your website, your careers page, social media pages giving to the job seeker or the viewer who's looking at those? It's crucial that your marketing team is aligned with your talent acquisition team in order to keep a consistent message, in order to make sure marketing knows and talent acquisition knows what jobs you're focused on, what needs to be portrayed in terms of the current workforce, workplace, the culture, diverse and inclusive representation, and make sure that you really are attracting diverse candidates into that pipeline as much as possible. So I always suggest putting yourself in the shoes of a job seeker and thinking about it from their perspective. If you were a job seeker and were to view your own company website, your social media pages, your careers page, what would entice you to apply? Do you only have jobs listed on your careers page? If so, what is that telling you about the internal workplace and culture? Is that giving you any impression that it is in fact a healthy work environment, that there is representation from all different types of backgrounds and people with disabilities and veterans with disabilities as well? Or is that just telling you that yes, we do have jobs available for you to apply to? So I would take that into consideration and also make sure that all of that content is consistent and in an easy to find place. It's not buried in a page within a page and hard for that job seeker to find. That really cuts out the point of having that information on the site and easily accessible. There are a lot of places that an organization can start, and it can feel like an overwhelming question because of that. you're taking a look at your website, you're taking a look at the internal workplace, the culture, talent acquisition team, marketing. Where should you start? I suggest starting with accessibility. That's one of the easiest things to evaluate with all of the current tools and resources that are out there. And one of the barriers for job seekers with disabilities who might be using screen readers or might be using keyboard strokes instead of a mouse in order to click through your application. When you talk about job application completion rates and those being lower, it might be because of accessibility reasons and the job seeker can't access all of the information. And ultimately, a lot of the changes that make a website accessible improve the experience for all job seekers and employees, disability or not. So Getting Hired has a number of tools in order to help with this topic. We partner with Job Accommodation Network, or JAN, in order to offer a confidential assessment of the website, and in order to evaluate your careers page and application to give you a baseline evaluation of how accessible all of those pages and each of those steps along the application are.